average American absolutely should not be afraid of China. But the average American and the average person in the world absolutely should take China seriously. Recognize this is going to be a big part of America's life and the world's life forever. It is a quarter of all humanity. It's an increasing share of production. It's where the big decisions about the planet's environmental future will be made. It's an important place that we have to pay attention to, but paying attention doesn't mean running in terror.
The first time I was here was 18 years ago, in the year 1990, and I traveled from Hong Kong to Shanghai to Beijing. And I would say that my biggest impressions of China at that time were a country that was very crowded and very challenging to move around in. Fast forward to 2008 and it's completely different.
This is my third visit to China, and the amount of change that's taken place over the last 6 years is really astonishing.
You can imagine 3 decades ago, China was so poor. We just like, I went to North Korea. You know, we just like North Korea today. And you compare nowadays China, you compare China with the States.
China is perhaps where the United States was in the early 1900s, in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. But the difference in China is that, you know, they're playing catch up at this point. And so everything that they've been able to learn from the West, they're applying now at like 3 times the speed.
The State Council officially defined the status of Tianjin as an international port city and the economic center of North China. Tianjin will become an eco-city with a prosperous economy, advanced scientific and educational facilities, modern infrastructure, and beautiful environment.
The leaders of Tianjin have a vision which they've laid out in these incredibly detailed models of where the city is now and which parts of the city are going to be developed and how the port is going to grow into one of the world's largest, and all of these things linked by transportation and rail and roadways and planned communities and importing, exporting, free trade zones are all part of this vision. The thing that is amazing, first of all, is that they have come up with this vision. The government does it, and unlike in a lot of other countries, the government doesn't have a lot of opposition to its vision. So when it wants to do something, it can.
First thing that really strikes me about China overall is the vastness of its vastness. And they try to prepare you for that before you come here, but it's hard until you actually see it to get it. I tried to ask one of our a Chinese official who was taking us around Tianjin. I walked out and I said, well, I'll ask you the question that I hear from my listeners and that I can very much viscerally relate to, which is we're scared. You know, we see this huge Chinese port that you guys are talking about building in the next 10 years, and we look at our own cities and say it's very hard to build a house. And we look at you and you're just, because, you know, you have a centralized government and all this, you know, money at your disposal, you build this enormous thing. It's frightening to us. And he really couldn't relate to that question at all.
I think there is an unconscious desire on many Americans' part to have a simple, clear way to think of China. You know, China is bad or China is good. China is bad because it's a dictatorship, because they're poisoning us, et cetera, et cetera. Or it's good because they want to be like Americans and they are opening up. Both of those simplifications, like any other simple view, are wrong, and China is simply too important to America in the long run to be classified, to be pigeonholed. China has in all of its modern history, been able to kind of skate along with its twinned views that, number one, it's a small developing power, and so it can't really take responsibility for things. Number two, it believes in absolute non-interference. It's not going to mess in other people's business. Its influence in the world is becoming great enough that the second especially is not going to cut the mustard anymore. People are going to say, you can't just wash your hands of what's going on in Darfur. You can't just plead no interest in what's happening in Burma or North Korea. So just by its increasing scale, whether or not it's a responsible stakeholder, China will be under increasing pressure to use its influence in a more internationally responsible way.
China has become Sudan's biggest trading partner. It buys more than
China is so huge, and the size does matter.
across the country.
They used to have this sort of attitude, I just focus on domestic issues. What happened outside the world is none of our business. But now, the world is becoming more interactive. So China realized that first they have to stabilize the domestic society, then also to play a more important role on the global stage.
China has been able to bring people out of rural poverty more successfully than any other culture or economy has ever done before. Many tens of millions of people now have some cash income who used to be just stuck on the farm. It's done that, and it's also guaranteed that almost all people in the country are somewhat better off year by year by year, moving up rather than moving down. It's done that at the expense of keeping its currency artificially cheap, living an artificially low level compared to what it could do. But that's been a bargain that's been, on the whole, a plus for the Chinese government and most of the Chinese peoples.
They have this growing income gap, and they don't want to create political unrest in the agrarian heartland, because that's been China's downfall for centuries, is that farmers get unhappy and they have rebellion.
It's kind of amazing to get to come to an economy that is being born in front of your eyes.
What will China produce? Will China innovate?
If China becomes poorer, there are social disorder issues. If it becomes richer, there are both environmental consequences and a different sort of social order challenge. Will people be content with an authoritarian regime? I don't know.